Hey, mamas. I am so excited that you're here. Welcome to May. And this month, we are going to talk all about bringing back the fun. So before we can do that, though, we need to talk about what's filling your jar. You might be wondering, what on earth is she talking about? What is filling my jar? Okay. Now, there's this story, and I don't even know if this really happened or not. This could be something that somebody made up on the internet, but it's a really good story. So there's a story of a teacher, or maybe it's a college professor, I don't know, it depends on where you look, who had rocks and pebbles and sand and a jar, and took the jar and put the rocks in the jar and said, "Is the jar full?" And the student said, "Yes, the jar is full." Professor then took the pebbles and poured them into the jar. Said, "Is the jar full?" And they said, "Oh, yes, now the jar is full." Then the professor took sand and put sand in and shook the jar and filled the jar with sand. Said, "Now the jar is full." Okay. Now, if you reverse that, though, and you put the sand in first and then tried to put the rocks in, the rocks wouldn't fit. Now, lots of people use this analogy to say, okay, the rocks are the important things in your life, like those really few, maybe 5 or 6, top areas of your life, maybe your spirituality, your family, your mission, right? Your health, those really big things. And then, the pebbles are maybe your hobbies and all those things that we do to make ourselves happy and surround ourselves with joy. And then the sand is kind of, all this other stuff that fills up our lives, things like Netflix and social media, and email. God bless the email. It's funny. I have so many people that talk to me and say, like, I hate email. I absolutely hate email. I think that the problem is that we have a really hard time distinguishing between rocks and pebbles and sand, right? And ultimately what happens is we fill our lives with sand and there's no room for the rocks. Or a lot of times what I'm seeing happen is that people have some of the rocks, but a lot of sand, and there's no pebbles, right? And I really believe that the pebbles are the things that make life fun, right? Those are the things, I don't know what your thing is. I always ask people, like, so what are your hobbies? People are like, hobbies? What are those? I don't have time for hobbies, and I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, I think that things that we don't traditionally think of as hobbies have become hobbies. Binge watching Netflix, for example, seems to be a hobby that a lot of people have. I talk to women all the time that say, I wish I had time to start a business, but I have absolutely no time. I'm so busy. And then, I see their posts on Facebook, which they're posting on Facebook all the time about, all the shows that they're watching. And it's just like, I think we kind of have things backwards sometimes. I don't have time to take care of my health, but I've got time to watch 52 episodes on Netflix. And it's like, listen, like, here's ultimately the thing, right? If you are happy in your life with what's filling your jar, then go at it. Like, have a blast. But you know what? A lot of you that I talk with, you are not happy with what is in your jar. And so here's what I want you to start to think about. This summer, as we're going into the summer and things are starting to open up again, I really want you to think about what you want to fill your jar. Because right now, you may not feel this way, but right now your jar is empty. right? And you have the ability to put in that jar. You get to determine, you know what, these are going to be my rocks. These are going to be my pebbles. And this is going to be my sand. And frankly, you know, the way I kind of look at sand is sand is that thing that kind of gunks up your shoes, right? And those things are the things that we unconsciously spend our time on that we really wish we didn't, right? Those games on your phone and Facebook and Netflix and just getting caught up in the drama around us. And so what I'd like you to think about as we go into this summer, right? And things start to reopen. I want you to think about, what do you want in your life? What do you want in your jar? Because right now, we have to decide as individuals, do we want our lives to go back to the way they were pre-COVID? Do we want them to look more like they did during COVID? Or do we want something like completely different? And I know for Jeff and I apologize for the sound quality in this episode, but for Jeff and I, like, we decided, we're like, you know what? We're going to move to Florida. And if you're watching this video, instead of listening to the podcast, you'll see like this wall is different than the wall you normally see. This is actually the wall in our new bedroom. Our furniture is not here yet. And so hopefully by the time this episode's published, I will have furniture, but right now I don't. So I'm literally on a plastic folding table, okay, with a kitchen chair that I got from IKEA, recording this on my computer. I don't even have all my equipment with me, because we made the decision that we didn't want to go back to pre-COVID. We wanted to craft a different life. And so we decided, you know what? Okay, we're gonna dump out the jar. Like literally, we're gonna dump out the jar, and we are going to very methodically figure out what's going to go back in. And so for me, the things that I wanted in the jar were a healthier lifestyle, more time with Eric and Jeff, to not be stuck inside in the winter, and to enjoy life more. And so I gave my notice at the university back in September. I really dove in, to bookkeeper training school. I simplified my firm. I actually hired someone to help me with tax season this year, which God bless him. If I didn't have him, I don't know what I would do. I really don't. And I said, okay, we're going to simplify things, because I don't want to go back to what things were like before. And so last week, we closed on a house in Florida. We're down here now. We sold our house in Connecticut. And, my jar looks a lot different. I have not watched TV in, I don't know, a couple weeks, maybe. I'm swimming at night, and I'm walking first thing in the morning, and I'm listening to audiobooks, and I'm working on bookkeeper training school. And I just decided, right? And we really decided that we wanted something different. And I would encourage you right now to start asking yourself what you want in your jar. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, I can't control because my kids do this and my kids do that. And, I've got this activity and that activity. And it's really interesting because I think that we think that we have very little control over our lives. And the reason for that is because we have turned over control of our lives to the schedule and the clock and the activities, instead of saying, you know what, maybe my kids do one activity, or maybe, you know what, maybe we don't do any activities this season, and maybe we just chill out. Wouldn't that be interesting? And listen, and I get it. And for some of you, like, you're just, you're in the cycle that you feel that things are the way they are, but they don't have to be. They don't. You have choice. Ultimately, you're the parent. You can say, you know what? We're not doing any activities this season. We're going to stay home, or we're going to travel, or we're going to do whatever. But I just want you to realize that there is more freedom in your schedule, in your jar, than you are giving credit for it. And if you don't think so, what I'd like you to do for the next week is I'd like you to actually track what you do. So maybe you use a calendar, maybe use a timer on your phone, maybe you just reflect at the end of the day. You probably need to do it multiple times a day. But think about how much time are you spending on Facebook? How many episodes did you watch on Netflix? What is your zone out? Maybe it's a game on your phone. What's the thing that you zone out to? How many, hours did you spend driving your kids to activities? When's the last time you asked your kids if they really want to do all those activities? The answer might surprise you. I remember, Greg McKeown was telling a story. Greg McKeown is the author of Essentialism, which I've talked about a number of times on the show. And he just came out with a book called Effortless. And I'm about a third of the way into the book, and it's absolutely phenomenal. It's funny because I'm going to listen to Effortless, and then I'm going to listen to Essentialism, and I'm going to listen to Effortless again, because it's just so, so good. And it's based off the premise of how do you make life easier. And it's funny because he told the story, he told the story about the jar in the book. And it's really funny because I was already thinking about this premise, and then I heard that story in the book, and I'm like, yes, this is what we're going to talk about. Because ultimately what I'd like you to do is and we'll put a link to the book in the show notes for this episode. Go to smallbizmama.com and I'll put the link to the book. It's so, so good. But I want you to think about okay, what am I spending my time on? Right? And am I, are these the rocks in my life, the pebbles in my life, or the sand? Right? So are they the really important things? Are they the, kind of joyful filler things? Or is this the sand that is gunking up the works? Right? It's like when you go to the beach and get sand in your shorts, it's not very comfortable, right? When you start looking at that. I'd love to see you do this for a week. Just to see where are you spending your time? Where's it going? And then say, okay, what of these things, if they're not my rocks, what can I eliminate? What can I get rid of? What can I trade off? Right? I have people come to me all the time and say, I can't afford somebody to clean my house. Okay, well, a lot of you who listen are bookkeepers, right? Go find a house cleaner who needs a bookkeeper and do a trade and get that off your plate, right? Because you could probably do the bookkeeping in less time than it takes you to clean your house. And then you can create some more free time. You can create some more margin for the rocks in your life. I think a lot of times we always seek out the hardest solution to everything, or our brain naturally thinks of the hardest solution to everything. And so we don't move forward with easy things like setting up a trade, finding a housekeeper that might want a bookkeeper. I think about it, you could just call a whole bunch of housekeepers and say like, hi, I'm a bookkeeper. And, I'd love to find I'd love to find a housekeeper who would like to trade with me. Cleaning for bookkeeping. If you're interested in doing that, let me know. And I'm sure you'll get somebody to bite. So you'll hate doing that stuff. But don't just rule things out because you think it can't be done. Because let me tell you, pretty much anything is possible if you're just willing to sit and find a solution. It's funny. A friend of mine reached out to me a couple days ago and said, hey, listen, I just had a post of mine pop up in my time hop or whatever it's called, for Facebook. And last year on this date, this was like a couple days ago, she sent this to me. She said, I asked people, now that COVID's here, like what in your life is going to change going forward? Like, what do you want to do to make things different? And I posted, I want to move to Florida and have a pool so I can be outside year round. And a year later, actually 2 days prior to it being a year later, we closed on our house down here. But it's all about saying, these are the things that are important to me. This is where I want to ground my life. And so I am going to make room for those rocks. And I'm going to make sure that they make it into the jar. So I'd love to know what's in your jar. What's in your ideal jar? You can either comment on this post at smallbizmama.com or come join the conversation in the Small Biz Mama community on Facebook. We will link to that in the show notes. You can go to smallbizmama.com, look up episode 57, and tell us, what do you want to fill your jar? And hey, mamas, listen, I want to thank you so much for supporting this show, for telling your friends about it. You sharing this information, you watching all the live videos that we do on Facebook, which, I'm live, twice a week on the Bookkeeper Training School page. Even if you don't want to be a bookkeeper, there's tons of great information that we put out on that page. I'm talking about all sorts of things like marketing and business and just, getting things done and getting in the mindset to be able to, to run this business and make life happen. And so I'd love to see you there as well. But thank you so much for sharing this show with people and talking about this show, because it does really help spread the word. So, all right, mamas, thank you so much. I will see you in our next episode. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Small Biz Mama with Kristen Ingram. If you'd like to learn how to create more margin in your life, please visit us at smallbizmama.com. That's smallbizmama.com.